Her colonel betrayed her. To silence her, he threw the bound Marine from a bridge. The river was meant to be her end. But a retired K-9, a forgotten hero, saw the betrayal. He leaped into the raging water. Why? Because a soldier never leaves another behind. A pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching? If you believe that true loyalty is stronger than betrayal, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get our newest stories first. The late autumn rain fell in punishing sheets, turning the winding trails of Trinity National Forest into rivers of mud. It was a cold, unforgiving downpour that stripped the last of the colored leaves from the branches, leaving behind skeletal trees that clawed at a bruised gray sky. Inside her battered Jeep, Sergeant Anya Petrova barely felt the chill seeping through the cracked door seal. Adrenaline was the only fuel keeping her system from shutting down. For 3 days, it had been her constant companion ever since she'd watched Corporal Reyes, her friend since childhood, get thrown from a ridge during a training accident. Just hours before, he had pressed a micro SD card into her palm, his voice a desperate whisper. They're selling the same weapons we're supposed to be protected by. Trust no one, Anya. Now she was being hunted by them. The black SUV in her rearview mirror wasn't military. Its polished, menacing form belonged to Silas Croft, a name Reyes had circled in his notepad with a shaking hand. The Blackwood Bridge loomed ahead, a latticework of rusted iron spanning the roaring Trinity River. A trap. A dead end. Anya slammed on the brakes, the Jeep skidding to a halt just shy of the precipice. She was ready for her final stand. Silas Croft emerged from the rain, moving with an unhurried grace that was more terrifying than any sudden aggression. He was a man in his late 40s, built like a battering ram, a former Marine colonel who had once been a legend. Now, dressed in black tactical gear, his steel-gray eyes held only the hollow emptiness of a mercenary. Sergeant Petrova, Croft's voice was a low baritone that cut through the storm, a blend of disappointment and admiration. You're as stubborn as Reyes. I taught him everything he knew, except when to stop digging. You murdered him, Anya snarled, her hand gripping the pistol at her side. Her appearance was a testament to the ordeal. At 24, she had the lean, toned physique of a recon Marine, but her fair skin was pale with exhaustion, and a gash on her forehead dripped blood that mingled with the rain on her sharp cheekbones. Her piercing blue eyes, usually calm and analytical, now blazed with a defiant fire. I gave him a soldier's death. You, on the other hand, have made yourself a traitor. Croft gestured dismissively. 2 figures materialized from the gloom behind him. They were simpler men, muscle-bound and efficient, their faces blank canvases of brutality. The fight was short and brutal. Anya was skilled, but she was alone, outnumbered, and running on fumes. They disarmed her and bound her wrists with a cruel efficiency. Croft approached, plucking the SD card from her tactical vest pocket. Is this all you have? A little bit of ideology in a broken world? He looked at her with an almost paternal pity. You and I aren't so different, Petrova. We both see the rot in the system. The difference is, you tried to fix it. I chose to profit from it. Which of us is the realist? He leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for her. Reyes called your name before he fell. He hoped you'd get away. It was the most brutal form of torture. He didn't just want her dead. He wanted to shatter her spirit. His men dragged her to the railing. As they pushed her over the edge, into the icy, raging water below, the last thing she heard was Croft's cold, indifferent laughter. Meanwhile, in the small, sleepy town of Weaver's Creek, nestled at the edge of the forest, Sheriff Brody stared at the military's official report. He was a man in his late 50s, just a few months from retirement, with a perpetual slouch born from a bad back and decades of thankless work. His uniform was neatly pressed, but his eyes were tired. The report on Corporal Reyes's death was clean, concise, and stamped accidental. But Brody, who had fished and hiked these woods his entire life, knew that ridge. People didn't just slip from there. Furthermore, Old Man Hemlock, a hunter with eyes like a hawk, had called in about a fancy black SUV with no plates heading up that logging road on the day of the incident. The military liaisons had politely told him to close the case, but a lifetime of small-town instinct screamed that something was wrong. With a sigh, he placed the file not in the closed-case cabinet, but in the bottom drawer of his desk. It was a small act of defiance, a decision to keep the file open for just a little while longer. Deeper in the forest, hidden in a thicket of pines near the bridge, Kaiser was startled by the rumble of the SUV's engine. The sound was too similar to the Humvee in Kandahar, the one that had carried his handler, his partner, his entire world, just before the IED had turned everything to fire and noise. The German Shepherd, now 7 years old, was a noble creature, his black and tan coat thick, his posture still proud, but a deep sadness lingered in his amber eyes. He flinched, his body tensing with the memory of trauma. But then, through the rain, he saw the confrontation, the familiar sight of a soldier in uniform being subdued. A muffled scream, the glint of iron, and the final brutal push. The past nightmare and the present horror merged, and an instinct far more powerful than fear, loyalty, took over. The antiseptic smell of the clinic was the first thing that pierced through Anya's fragmented consciousness. It was a clean, sterile world away from the mud and fury of the river. Dr. Elias Thorne worked with the practiced hands of a man who had spent a lifetime mending broken bodies, albeit usually four-legged ones. He was in his early 50s, with a salt and pepper beard that couldn't hide the tired lines etched around his mouth. His tall frame was perpetually stooped, as if carrying an invisible weight, and his deep-set, intelligent eyes held a profound weariness. Grief had been his companion for 2 years, ever since his son, Liam, had been killed, and it had hollowed him out, leaving a cynical, reclusive shell. His initial plan was simple: stabilize the woman, treat the dog, and call the authorities. But as he cut away the soaked, muddy fatigues, he saw the roadmap of her life etched onto her skin. A puckered scar on her shoulder from an old shrapnel wound, the faint white lines of smaller cuts, the hardened calluses on her hands. This was a warrior, not just a soldier. Beside the operating table, Kaiser lay still, his breathing shallow from exhaustion. The shepherd refused to close his eyes, his gaze fixed on Anya, then shifting to Elias, a silent, unwavering sentinel. Elias, a man who had lost his faith in human loyalty, saw in the dog's gaze a pure, incorruptible devotion that made his chest ache. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving a world washed clean. A small television in the corner of the clinic lobby flickered with the national news. As Elias drank his coffee, a special report flashed onto the screen. Anya's face, a stoic official military portrait, filled the frame. Sergeant Anya Petrova, the anchor's voice was grave, is now the subject of a nationwide manhunt. Officials have named her a person of interest in an espionage investigation involving the theft of classified military intelligence. She is considered armed and dangerous. Elias froze, the coffee mug halfway to his lips. A frame job, a sophisticated, brutal setup. Calling the authorities now would be signing her death warrant. He looked at the woman sleeping fitfully on his examination table, then walked to the old iron safe in his office. He pulled out a heavy, military-grade hard drive, Liam's final legacy, a puzzle he could never solve. Anya awoke with a gasp, her training kicking in before she was fully conscious. Her muscles coiled, ready to fight, but a searing pain in her ribs stopped her. She saw Elias standing by the door, his face an unreadable mask. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice a raw rasp. "The man who pulled you out of the river," Elias said, his tone flat. He gestured to the television. And apparently, the man harboring a wanted spy. Suspicion hardened Anya's features. She didn't trust him. He didn't want her trouble. The standoff was broken by a low whine from Kaiser, who limped over and rested his head on her hand. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Elias's expression finally broke, revealing a flicker of raw pain. "Because the rest of the world wants you dead, and I just want to know why my son is." He laid a folder on the table beside her. It was filled with Liam's notes. The name Operation Nightingale was scrawled on the top. Anya stared at the name, disbelief washing over her. She explained everything, the pieces of the puzzle she held. Elias listened, then placed the heavy hard drive next to the folder. Liam believed the answers were in here, but it's encrypted. His last message said, The key is in the echo. I never understood what he meant. Anya's eyes lit with understanding. In signals intelligence, an echo is a secondary data packet used to authenticate a primary signal, she explained, her voice gaining strength. The SD card Croft took, it wasn't the evidence, it was the key. He thinks he has the data, but he only has the means to unlock it. She paused, her mind racing. But the encryption is military grade. To even attempt to use another key, a new chip I have hidden, I'd need a military data port adapter. We can't get one of those out here. Elias was silent for a long moment, the gears turning in his weary mind. He thought of his last bitter argument with Liam, of refusing to help, of telling his son the world wasn't worth saving. This was his chance, not just for justice, but for redemption. Maybe we can, he said slowly. Liam was careful. He left a safety deposit box at the bank in town. He said it was for emergencies. The small clinic had become a pressure cooker. With the adapter retrieved from Liam's deposit box, the race against the encryption had begun. For 2 days, the only sounds were the rhythmic click of Anya's fingers on the keyboard, the low hum of the laptop, and the endless drumming of rain against the roof. Lines of code scrolled down the screen in a green, indecipherable waterfall. Hope dwindled with every passing hour. They were fighting against time, against isolation, and against an enemy who was always one step ahead. Silas Croft, frustrated by the lack of a body, shifted his tactics from a physical hunt to a psychological war. He saturated the region with wanted flyers. Anya's stern military photo was plastered in every gas station, diner, and post office within 100 miles. A $50,000 reward was offered for information leading to her capture. Croft knew the corrosive power of greed in a small, struggling community. The clinic, once a sanctuary, was now an island in a sea of potential informants. In his dusty office, Sheriff Brody felt the walls closing in. 2 federal agents had arrived that morning, their city suits and polished shoes, a stark contrast to the town's rustic simplicity. The lead agent, a man named Harris with a sharp jaw and condescending eyes, officially took over the Reyes case. He treated Brody like a relic, a small-town cop who should stick to writing parking tickets. "We'll handle the real police work, Sheriff," Harris had said, dismissing him with a wave. The insult ignited a spark in the old lawman. Acting on his gut, Brody drove his personal truck deep into the woods to find Jebediah "Jeb" Holloway, the hunter who had found Reyes's body. Jeb was a wiry man in his 60s, with skin like tanned leather and a quiet demeanor. "Weren't no slip," Jeb confirmed, spitting a stream of tobacco juice. "Heard 2 pops, clean as a whistle, about a minute apart. Sounded like a suppressed pistol, not a hunting rifle." Fueled by this confirmation, Brody spent hours reviewing the grainy security footage from the town's only gas station. He found it, the black SUV, refueling on the day of Reyes's death. A tall, broad-shouldered man in tactical gear stepped out. The camera angle was poor, the quality terrible, but the man's powerful build was unmistakable. Brody cross-referenced it with old news articles about military contractors he found online. The silhouette matched Silas Croft. The pieces were forming a terrifying mosaic. That night, the pressure at the clinic reached its breaking point. A lone figure, one of Croft's mercenaries, moved through the trees, a heat-sensing monocular pressed to his eye. He spotted the faint thermal signature from the clinic's generator. As he crept closer, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness. Kaiser moved with a silence that defied his size. There was no warning growl. He launched himself, a blur of black fur, sinking his teeth into the mercenary's thigh. Man cried out in shock and pain, stumbling backward. His pistol flew from his grasp. Before he could recover, Kaiser had snatched the weapon in his powerful jaws and dragged it into the undergrowth. The mercenary, disarmed and terrified of the silent predator in the woods, scrambled back to his vehicle and fled. Kaiser returned minutes later, limping, a deep gash bleeding from his shoulder where the man had managed to slash him with a knife. As Elias worked under the single bright lamp of the clinic, carefully stitching the wound of the loyal dog who had just saved them, a soft electronic chime echoed in the silence. Anya stared at the screen, her face ashen. "I'm in." The files opened one after another. Shipping manifests, encrypted communications, bank transfers. And then the final file. A blueprint. A payload manifest. A timeline. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not just about selling weapons. It's a false flag attack, a dirty bomb, Union Station, Chicago, in less than 48 hours. "Message sent," Anya whispered, her voice tight. She had compressed the hard drive's entire contents and transmitted them to Captain Marcus Thorne's secure channel. But the satellite signal was weak, intermittent. It might not have gone through. They were on their own. Moments later, the night's silence was shattered by the crunch of tires on gravel. Twin beams of light cut through the trees, followed by another pair. They weren't coming to talk. Silas Croft, having learned of the mercenaries' failure, knew the time for subtlety was over. He didn't need the hard drive anymore. He needed scorched earth and silence. "Barricade the door," Anya commanded, her voice dropping into the calm, authoritative tone of a combat leader. "They'll come from all sides." The clinic became a fortress. While Anya moved like a wraith through the surrounding woods, setting tripwires and deadfalls with surgical precision, Elias worked from within. He wasn't a soldier, but he was a chemist. He mixed veterinary anesthetics and irritants into glass vials, makeshift smoke bombs and incapacitating agents. The assault began. Croft's six-man team moved with disciplined military formation, but they were hunting in Anya's world. The first man was taken out by a snare that hoisted him into the air. The second stumbled into a cloud of vaporized sedative from one of Elias's vials, collapsing into a heap. The firefight was chaotic and brutal. From inside, Elias used his old hunting shotgun to keep them pinned down, while Anya, armed with the mercenary's pistol and a hunting knife, struck from the shadows, an avenging ghost in the rain-soaked forest. Finally, only Croft remained. He found Anya near an ancient pine tree, both of them breathing heavily, battered and bruised. This was no longer about a mission. It was personal. "All this for a flag and a failed system," Croft sneered, lunging at her. Their fight was a desperate, savage dance. He was stronger, but she was more agile, fueled by a righteous fury. He overpowered her, pinning her against the rough bark of the pine, his knife pressing against her throat. "I told you," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "Ideals get you a grave." A guttural roar ripped through the night. Kaiser, despite his bandaged shoulder, launched himself from the darkness. He clamped his jaws onto Croft's leg, the sudden agonizing pain causing Croft to lose his balance. It was the opening Anya needed. She twisted free, disarming him. Enraged, Croft drew a backup pistol from his ankle holster and fired wildly at Anya. With a final heroic act of loyalty, Kaiser leaped into the path of the bullet. The shot echoed through the valley as the great dog crumpled to the ground. That single gunshot was a beacon. Headlights flooded the clearing as an old police cruiser skidded to a halt. Sheriff Brody burst out, his service revolver shaking but steady. "Drop it, Croft! It's over!" Brody's lone stand created the critical moment of chaos. Seconds ceased still. Later, the thunderous chop of helicopter blades filled the air. Ropes descended, and black-clad recon Marines swarmed the area. Captain Thorne had received the message. Silas Croft, cornered and defeated, was taken into custody. The battle was over. Anya rushed to Kaiser's side, cradling his head as Elias frantically worked to stop the bleeding. The hero of the night was still breathing. Anya's life was not spared by chance, but by the unwavering loyalty of a German shepherd, a powerful reminder that God often works through the simplest of his creations. Just as Kaiser became a symbol of hope and healing, we too can find strength and renewal in the quiet ways God places light in our path. In our daily lives, we all face storms, moments when betrayal, fear, or loss threaten to pull us under. Yet, if we open our eyes, we will see that God always sends a hand, or even a paw, to guide us back to safety. That is the true miracle, that love never abandons us, and that faith can turn even the darkest trial into a new beginning. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to share it with others who may need a message of hope. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you believe in the power of God's miracles, type Amen. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage, faith, and second chances. May God bless you and your loved ones, today and always.